Lindenmeyr. My husband and I own Linden Land Group, which is an ecological landscape design build company now based out of Shelburne, Vermont. And we've been doing that sort of work now for 10 years. So I graduated with an environmental science degree way back when, in '92, and I spent 9 years as a consultant to EPA doing ecological restoration, but mostly hazardous and nuclear waste remediation, which is very different from what I do now, but similar in a way. So I come at it from an environmental perspective and from a science perspective. Trying to really help enact a paradigm shift, and that is really challenging. I think most people are looking for control in their lives, and the whole process of reintroducing wild into a built environment is scary. We had a project up in South Hero, which is an island obviously north in Lake Champlain, that they wanted to, it was a new house, it was a really disturbed built environment. They had pretty much had to clear a large area, and they were putting in a really large septic system. So they were open to the idea of us introducing a lot of native species. And so we built a large meadow. It's over an acre. So there's a real wide variety of plants that are attracted to pollinators and birds, and they even have fox and all kinds of small mammals in the meadow. But I think it was a real challenge because the wife was really on board and the husband was hesitant. He came from a military background, talked about needing order and control. I totally get it. I'm right there with him. And so finding that balance between them of what was an acceptable amount of wildness. It ended up being more successful than I could have dreamed possible. It's beautiful all throughout the year. They're thrilled with it. They continue to become more and more engaged in that landscape. I fall back on science a lot. I think that evidence is, that's the beauty of science, is that we can show, look, our carrying capacity on the land is so limited. So trying to show them that every square foot in their yard has a purpose. And if it's not going to be growing food, then it should be being put back to wilderness somehow. And so it's finding a balance between what they're comfortable with, how much order do we need to establish in that space, and then how much can we give back. I design a lot of patios. And people are like, that's not very ecological, but it is because it gets people outside. And anything that puts them outside and in contact with nature, and then they sit there and they start looking around and they start noticing that the birds are hanging out right next to them, and that gives them some sense of connection. By the end of every season, I get a little burnt out. I'm like, I'm just designing aesthetically pleasing backyards. Am I really having an impact? And I think that I am. And I think that the reason why is because if you start thinking about how a sustainable community has to function, we need to give up as much land that we don't really need as possible. And if that larger model of, say, okay, we take this large area and we condense the people in it to allow as much wildness to remain intact and functional as possible, and you set aside the space you need for agriculture, and you make that as sustainable as you can by doing it organically, introducing corridors for habitat, by really focusing on diversity of species, cover cropping, all that good stuff. Then what you have left is, okay, so we've sort of condensed this population into an area. How do we make that community as sustainable as possible? And that's where we come in. Yes, I think it's contagious. I think that you start to accept more and more, and you let go as long as you see that there can be a balance, that we can produce a combination of wildness and control. I think that we have to be patient because it is a paradigm shift and it's a very slow one, but there's some amazing leaders out there that are giving really good examples of how a wild aesthetic can be pleasing. There's some really great examples in Europe of people that are making meadows look beautiful, but still have enough roughness to them that sort of starts to seep into people's aesthetic. And so I think that it helps bring people outside. You start talking to your neighbors if you're out picking food in your front yard instead of just looking at a vast expanse of mowed death. I mean, I'm not that anti-lawn, but I think that when I look around and I see lost potential, I see square footage that could be host to a teeming plethora of biology, and either as food for us or food for others, that it's sad to me to think that our need for control wipes out all other possibilities.